Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us again. We have two guests that are familiar with the show, but more importantly, they're familiar with hurricane preparedness. Okay, that's the most important part to me, not just because they're friends, but because it helps save me from the disaster of a hurricane. Mr. Jackson, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you very much for asking. And I'd like to thank our guests for coming on and sharing this important information with us.
Very good. And Miss Disaster Jean.
Yes,
Jean Silver. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. You know, you got to have a catchy name, especially during hurricane season,
Right.
you know.
As long as the hurricane doesn't catch me, I'm okay. My favorite public health guy, Antonio Nichols. Mr. Nichols, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I appreciate the invite back, and hopefully we can cover some good topics to help some folks out there prepare for this.
I think we can. You guys are always informative, and I much appreciate both of you showing up on the show for me. The prettier face will be on a little later. She's running a little late. So let's get started. Usually I go with women first, but tonight I'm gonna deviate a little bit because it's hurricane season and the forecasters have predicted a very busy one. And so Antonio, what I wanted to find out is when does the Florida Health Department in Duval County, Health Department, maybe I shouldn't say Health Department, the Florida Department of Health. When do they, I grew up, that shows you, I'm dating myself when I say the health department. But when do they start preparing for hurricane season?
Hold on. Ooh, I'm going to tell Jocelyn, you didn't start with the lady. I'm going to tell.
Saving the best for last. I'm okay.
Antonio, don't step into that bucket with him, bro.
Look, I'm more than happy to pass that question off to Disaster Jen first, and I'll come back.
Okay.
Well, only reason I did that was simply because the Florida Department of Health, and I guess probably one of the few last times Antonio and myself talked, we were discussing it with the city of Jacksonville about the preparedness. So that is why I went for Mr. Nichols first. I'm always usually ladies first, even when it comes to a disaster. But since Antonio passed the torch, we'll go ahead, Miss Sylvie, and get your answer for it.
You know, I've been with UF Health for about 17 years. I've been their disaster manager for about 7 years. We have 10,000 employees, right? So 10,000 employees, 2 hospitals, 3 standalone EDs, and about 160 clinics. That's like a small town.
Wow.
We start preparing all year round. We don't stop, and a lot of that preparation is education and training of our staff, getting them ready and them prepared.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you in a second, what do you guys do in training? But Mr. Nichols, what about yourself?
So very similar. So it actually mirrors what Ms. Sylvia said. So for us, we start preparing for the next hurricane. We start to prepare, and as she mentioned, this involves training of our staff, assessing our community needs, and so there's a lot of planning that goes into a response. And so right after the previous response ends, we immediately start thinking about how we can improve our next response for the upcoming season.
Yep.
that probably goes to the second question. Pretty much, what what is it that you guys are coordinating during this off season for us? So I think you both pretty much answered that. So what is the agency's preparedness and response team doing the year before the storms actually hit, which you kind of said, but is there any more detail we need to know along that?
Yeah.
Either one of you guys.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Believe it or not, we have a great relationship with the Department of Health. David. We train and educate together. I help do a lot of the mental health first aid for a lot of their shelter folks. But then, with our staff here, I'm teaching staff how to respond if there's a tornado, right? And the patient can't get up, they can't, move or get into the stairwell. We teach them how to keep our patients safe and then how to respond. And we do what's called a hazard vulnerability assessment. And we look at past weather events, and just like Antonio said, those past events, gates, we have these floodgates, they kind of look like L's and they clip together like Legos, because our pavilion building, it is over Hogan's Creek, and even on a bad rainy day, that might flood a little bit. So we've learned how to help mitigate some of those issues.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to take a look and imagine where about that L and what would fit.
Oh yeah, it literally looks like Lego pieces that go together, and they're about 9 feet tall. It can withstand over 25,000 pressure, so PSI, of water. So it just holds the water back.
Everyone, when we talk about the Department of Health, we think about, what is it, 6th Street? We think about 6th Street.
Yes.
Again, I'm dating myself. We think about 6th Street. I know you're doing the hurricane itself. That's not your operating place of operation. I don't think. I'm pretty much sure I know it's not the place of operation. But during the year of preparedness, what do you guys do, and where do you do it? Where do you do it at?
Right. And so, I think the year leading up to preparedness, it's all about one thing, and that's just training, and prep. And so what we try to do is we try to assess, what went according to plan, and in some cases what didn't. And then from there, we develop guidance on any revisions that will be made for next hurricane season. And so after an event, a hurricane event, we host what's called hot washes, or, these are just debriefings. And so we debrief with our staff, and this helps us to examine our strengths and weaknesses and related to the response. And then we use this information to basically update all of our plans that we have for our department. So this includes our hospital hurricane evacuation plan, mass fatality plan, our medical countermeasures plan, our shelter-based plan. So everything that we learned from the past season, we incorporated into our new planning. So it's almost like a very large, continuous quality improvement project where you're always building upon what you learned for the prior year. One of the other things that we do during this time is we take it time to replenish all of our caches. And so with the Department of Health, we have a local warehouse that are used for our special needs shelters. And so we take time during the off season to do our inventory, repair our caches, replace our caches so that we can be prepared and stocked up for the upcoming hurricane season. We also continuously coordinate with the city's emergency management division. And what we do here, we hold local and state exercises. Those give us the ability to understand where gaps may be in our response. And then we look to fill those gaps. And then we also, we're practicing. And so we're practicing for actual event. We're holding exercises. We're practicing setting up a shelter, demobilizing the shelter, how to best communicate during the disaster. And so a lot of it goes into preparation and then training and getting our staff up to speed to ensure that they know what their role is during times of disaster, so that when a disaster does hit our city, we can immediately move into action.
Now, one of the questions I have is, are these plans that either or both of you guys do, are they made public, or is that just internal for your use?
It varies. Some of it is public because, like Antonio said, we train and exercise together, so we share plans. Or if there's agencies or hospitals who need some help, don't recreate the wheel. We share it. Let us help you because that's what it's all about.
I just want to ask that question about coordination with the other institutions around town.
Yeah.
Where obviously Mayo and Baptist and St. Vincent, the whole night. How do you guys coordinate? Are you guys meeting with them throughout the year and sharing this stuff? Exactly what.
So once a month we have what's called the First Coast Disaster Council, and it's actually been around for over 30 years. I am a past president of it. We have a new president this year, but we meet once a month. We talk about training and education we can all do together. We talk about exercises like big community exercises that we all help each other. We open up training. If I'm holding a training at my hospital, I invite anybody on the First Coast Disaster to come in and be involved in the training. Because when you exercise and train together, you speak the same language. Yes. So one of the lessons learned from 9/11 is that they really didn't speak the same language. They didn't train, they didn't educate together. So we have broken down a lot of silos in Jacksonville by using the First Coast Disaster and the Healthcare Coalition.
Okay. And Mr. Nichols, you participate in these same monthly meeting at times, or you coordinating with?
Yeah, we do. And so, really disaster preparedness, the way I view it for any city or county is it's got to be a collaborative effort. And so every community has to be focused on the main goal. And that's when something threatens our community or happens in our community, we all come together with a plan, with the proper training to be able to respond for our residents who live in our community. And so, yeah, we are part of all those coalitions and all that training. There's a lot of key partners that we train and that we communicate with during off seasons. And so, we always try to remind folks that, hurricane season is one of the biggest seasons, and that's sort of the buzzwords, but we train for other disasters that may happen in our community as well. We have exercises with Jacksonville International Airport, in which we conduct exercises just to simulate if certain situations happen in our city at the airport, what we may do. All those agencies are coming together, for the exercise. And then afterwards, we do a sort of a tabletop debrief to, sort of understand, if there were gaps identified, as I mentioned before, how we fill those gaps. And so, Ms. Sylvie made a great point in that, it takes collaboration and it takes breaking down those silos. And if everybody's on the same page, and what that in turn gives our community is a quick and efficient response.
I'm going to go a little bit off what my planned discussion was and ask this question. It's still part of the discussion. When I was over at, doing residency over at Shands, we had to, sometimes you had to stay when we were threatened like that. What provisions, and either one of you can answer this question, what provisions for the people who participate in the whole act once it's activated? What provisions do you have for those people in terms of their housing? And also, because most of them have family, their family.
So I wrote this great thing. It's called the Family Disaster Plan, because at our hospital, when we shelter in place, I have about 600 blow-up mattresses. We have designated respite areas and shower areas. But this family disaster plan allows the staff member to have a plan for their family, their friends, their fur babies. They have to have a plan in place, because when they come here, I'm going to need them to work, and I'm going to need them to be concentrating on patient care.
Right.
But we have all of those set up, and we look at that plan at least twice a year, because, we're growing and maybe moving things around inside the hospital. So we look at that and have a plan ready for our folks to shelter in place. And we've done that typically. I think the most I've stayed has probably been about 4 days. and I had, at the time, I had kids at home, had a fur baby at home. And so in order for me to be here to help take care of the hospital, I had to have a plan in place for them.
That was my most fearful aspect when I was having to do just that, stay along, because you need these workers, healthcare workers. I'm not just going to say physicians, but
Yeah.
you need the nurses and the respiratory therapists and,
Yeah.
all the guys that you need. You need them to be around. And I guess
Yep.
including firemen and other public heroes that we have, the firemen, the policemen, and so
Yep.
on and so on. Mr. Nichols, what about you guys? What do y'all have in place?
So very similar. So we train our staff and we encourage our staff to have family disaster plans, and we actually go through that with them throughout the year. It's a common theme throughout the year prior to, let's say, like hurricane season, to say, ensure that your family disaster plan is updated, keep it updated. So that way, a staff member, if they are called to respond, they automatically have a plan, as Ms. Sylvie said, for their loved ones, their pets, elderly parents that they may be taking care of, things like that. A lot of what we allow for our staff is for them to bring their families to the locations to where they're going to be responding. And so we have several locations in which our responses happen. Myself and a couple of key members, we are at the Emergency Operations Center with the local agencies helping to coordinate the disaster overall. We have staff that are staffed or manned at our Public Health Incident Command. That's at one of our local facilities, 6th Street, down the street, Central Health Plaza, serves as our Incident Command area. And then we have staff who are actually sent to the shelters, our special needs shelters, to man those shelters. And so we offer several options. And so have a plan in place for your family. We allow the family members to be brought to those locations, and we make provisions for those individuals to stay with the staff person who's called to respond. And then when they're at the response location, we also try to ensure that we have simple provisions for the family members and our staff. And so whether that is food, blow-up mattresses for sleep, a designated sleeping area, and a shower area for them to take care of. Because as Ms. Sylvie said, when the staff members there, we need them to work. And during times of disaster, we're on 12 on, 12 off shifts, and so everybody has to ensure that they get the proper respite and that they're helping their fellow employee or staff member during this particular response. So we try to do our part to make sure that staff are prepared with those family plans, and that when they show up to our sites, that the agency has things in place for them and their families.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. Sylvie.
I was going to tell you, we started this event 6 years ago. We call it Hurricane Awareness Day. And all the local EOCs, which that's the Emergency Operations Center from Duval, Clay County, Nassau, Baker, St. Johns County, Department of Health. So I'm going to have Kendra and Rochelle out here. The Red Cross, the Poison Control, they come and set up in our hospital, and staff comes down, and this allows them to collect more resources and information to put in their family disaster plan. But also when there's community members here, maybe visiting someone or coming for a doctor's appointment, they can also walk around and talk to all of these resources as well to help their family get ready. But we have such a great response from that, from our staff. They look forward to it every year. We do it at our downtown hospital, and we do it at our North Hospital.
I guess it doesn't hurt you guys being right across the street from one another.
Oh, I know. I love it.
That's a huge advantage compared to other places. And then, people that are listening to our show are not from Duval, so they may not recognize that 6th Street is right, next to our catching that hospital on 8th Street. So,
yep.
Very good, very good. So what kind of supplies? What kind of supplies do you guys keep at the center? I know what you guys recommend for us to do, and I think if most people can go and take a look. You can go to Home Depot, you can go to Lowe's, you can go to many places that give you a little cheat sheet on your hurricane preparedness and the items that you need to have. But as far as huge facilities like what you guys are doing, you know, in terms of that. What do you guys put in store? What are you storing that you're saying you got to
So
resupply?
water is one, right?
Right.
So we store that, and believe it or not, did you know water has an expiration date? So you know you have to make sure that it's not water from 5 years ago.
Right.
So we're talking to our vendors about supplies. You know what helped us a lot too. Probably I'll say I love to announce benefits of COVID, right? Because we always focus on the bad part of COVID. But one of the great things that came out of COVID is that we had discussions about our central supply, our supplies, and having enough stock in place just in case there were issues getting supplies. So we have our supplies built up, our fuel built up, because we run with generators. Of course, water, our dietary folks, they have planned menus for patients and staff because they feed us really good here.
Yeah, I ate well when I was there.
When we shelter in place, they feed us great. So we're getting all of that ready before the season starts, you know, and we're talking to, you know, our shuttle bus drivers. A couple of years ago, we sheltered in place with our patients, and these were special needs patients who couldn't go home until they knew they had electricity. So with the help of JEA, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Department of Health, we were able to use our shelter buses to help take some of these patients home because it was confirmed their house was good and they had electricity. So it's not just stuff and staff, but it's also people and community partners.
I know ideally, and Mr. Nichols, I'm directing this at you as well, especially you. I know ideally we tell people, you know, a 3-day supply of this, that, and the other. How many days supply do you guys have on hand? Because I know what we would hope to happen is that in 3 days we can help get things back up and running like we need to. But let's say it's an exceptional need for extended services. What would be for lack of better description, the time limit that I can place on how long we'll be able to provide those services to the community?
Antonio, I'll let you go first this time. I won't take it.
That's right, no problem. So that's a good question, and really, what I say is there isn't a scenario in which I see that the health department or you know, for what we provide to the community will run out of supplies. And the reason I say that is there are triggers in place pre-storm and post. And so we're stocking up our you know, local warehouse to ensure that we have all the necessary provisions. And so, you know, you're talking about cots, you're talking about Hoyer lips, you're talking about oxygen concentrators, you know, ensuring that we have the correct voltage, you know, at our shelters that can handle the equipment that we're going to provide. All that's done we do walkthroughs with emergency management of all of our special needs shelters prior to ensure that we know about placing. If generators are going to get installed, you know, my team's there to ensure that, the correct wattage is in there. So for our stockpile, we have enough stockpile to sustain us for an extended response. However, if it appears to be a longer response than what has been deemed, then there are triggers that can put in place to where we can send up notices and request supplies from the state that the state would immediately bring down to our city, our county to assist. And so that ranges from, you know, if there's food, you know, water, medical needs in case, you know, our hospital systems need time to get back up and get reactive, we can essentially, you know, pop up what's called like sort of like a mobile hospital in certain locations, just, you know, continue to see services individuals during that time. And so really, I think our job is to manage what we have on staff and know what our trigger points are ahead of time when those requests need to go up to the state so that we can request those services and those supplies. And when that happens, that ensures that our community keeps the supplies and things that they need.
Yeah.
Excellent. Ms. Sylvie, we'll grab her in a second. I want to get you.
You know,
Get through this.
We always have plans in place, as well, that look at a 96-hour post-storm, right? I always like to use 96, but then I always like to talk about the 97th hour. Before we get to that 96 or 97, the same thing with what Antonio said. I am constantly looking at whatever is we might need. And then we are sending word up through the local emergency operations center to say, here are some of our needs. This is what I'm anticipating. I've used everything I had. Now I need help either locally or from the state. And, that again is building those partnerships and relationships with our community partners and with Duval EOC as well.
I got some other questions, but I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce from last week our co-host. Yeah, I told them you be ready for you be with us in 2 minutes. Boy, was I ever wrong.
Well, technically, good evening, everyone, and to our guests as well as our audience. I apologize for my tardiness, but I was actually listening, so I heard the discussion, and the best thing that I heard, nothing to our guests, but when Dr. Kane said a pretty face will be on soon. So thank you, Dr. Kane. I appreciate that. But
you were listening to us. You didn't see me wink my eye, right?
So I have I think about Antonio and disaster gen. My experience when I was at the health department and when the storm passed, and because the health departments was responsible for the special needs shelter from when I was at the health department, I recall that people showed up to the shelters prior to the storm. Let me back up a second. People showed up at the shelters prior to the storm. Now, Jen, you work in the hospital. Antonio, you've been at the health department 100 years. Okay, 30 years. But anyway, you know that people have medical conditions, high blood pressure, general population. When you bring your loved ones to the shelters, or when a storm is passing, to ready your family members who have health issues, what advice that you have in place? Because your family members, when the storm comes, they're going to still have diabetes and high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Right. So what can you share regarding that?
I'll tell you, one of the first things I always tell our patients, I tell my friends, I tell my neighbors, I tell anybody who wants to hear, go ahead and make sure that all of your medications are up to date, and that you have a list of your medications. Write out the name, how much you take, who the doctor is that prescribes it, where you get it prescribed at. Some of the lesson learned from previous hurricanes was that folks didn't get their medications filled, and they would go to the pharmacy that was no longer there, that it was damaged, and to make sure that they're having those conversations with their physicians, their primary care doctors, ahead of time before the storm, to make sure they have their medication. And if it's a special needs, and I know Antonio will talk about this too, we just had a meeting today with our case managers and our home health folks, is making sure that folks that are medically special needs, who need to be somewhere just in case the power turns off, is registering them for the shelters way ahead, before any sort, the day of or the day before. You want to really encourage people to do that, and to have a disaster and communication plan.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, now that's a good segue into. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add on that. I can't stress that more, the importance of a family disaster plan. And really what we're telling our special needs clients is we provide them a list of medications, your ID, any walking assisted dietary needs, to ensure that you're taking that into account. Although, we're staffing the shelters, and we do have some of those things on hand, we also try to encourage that those individuals have those themselves. Now, when it comes to medications, one thing that I do like to always mention is if there's a Florida law that residents can obtain a 30-day refill of your prescription medication, even if you have just refilled it, if you reside in a county who's under a hurricane warning, who's under a state, executive order, or whose emergency operations center, has, recently activated. And so, under these circumstances, a health insurer or managed care organization will allow to waive that refill to assume restriction at their own prescriptions. And so I also mention that to individuals so that they're aware of, some of the things that Florida law, affords them so that they can stock up on that medication prior to the storm. So post-storm, they have a good supply until services can get back.
It's funny to me because I think I told you guys I was wrong before we came on. Before we came on, that I was a runner. Ms. Turner, you know what that means. I run away from hurricanes. As a primary just did a 90-day supply. I will give them a full 90-day supply because, I just want to make sure they do not run out of medication. They don't need to see me to get that done. I pick up the phone or go online and refill all the medications. And I'm saying that for those physicians that are listening that, don't think about, worrying as to am I refilling them too early or what kind of medical legal consequences I may run into for refilling medications that they may have gotten from their non-primary care physician. Because that's one of the things that we have to look at. As, a lot of patients go see specialists, and their specialists are writing for the clarity so they can make sure our audience understand. But as far as the primary care physician, the buck stopped with us. We should be ready to help patients out at any point during this process. Yeah. And I don't care if it's specialty medication. If I got it on file, I will ask for it to be refilled. Providers understand. Let's do what we can to make everything happen in the right way for our community.
One of the biggest things you have to worry about are folks that are on dialysis, right? Because they maybe don't have a ride before the storm. 2, 3, 4 days have gone by. This could be a very serious medical problem and medical issue for them. All of the dialysis agencies, organizations, all of them have a plan. So I always encourage our home health nurses to make sure they're talking to the patients and that they're getting their dialysis before the storm organization, whichever one you go to, because they have a plan. Believe it or not, they all have a plan to make sure that wherever you are, there might be a different place you're going to go to get your next dialysis treatment with. So it's so very, very important, because if not, they're going to end up in the emergency room.
And you mentioned something real quick, that they do share the responsibilities of dialyzing patients that are not theirs. Because I was going to ask if they, something get damaged to one of those facilities, who do they need to contact to be able to get to other facilities? And, what are you guys' role in coordinating that?
Yeah, so we worked with several of them, and I always ask them, what's your plan? How are you going to communicate with your patients? How are you going to, and some of them provide transportation, some of them don't, because they'll use private ambulance. But I encourage patients, this organization, what is your plan? And they have a full plan of backup locations, who they use? Transportation. They
I'm glad you said that because the physicians, the providers need to know because I did not.
Yeah, and I recall, and I recall, Jen, when my dad was living, he was on dialysis and working at the health department. I knew about the special needs shelter, so I immediately, started the process, and they said, "Oh, he's already been very prepared." But I also want to make a mention of people who use CPAP machines or other medical devices that rely, and they need electricity in order to operate those devices. If you can, and they're not cheap because I've checked into it, there are batteries available that sometimes can operate those devices. But again, you can't wait until the disaster is threatening. You need to get prepared now. One thing, Antonio, that I wanted to mention to you about, I remember, again, because I worked at the health department for decades, I remember that people would wheel their relatives. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, no, you cannot do that. This is not a assisted living facility, for example. What can you speak to that and really impart to our audience that you can't do that, right?
Bye, Mama. I'll see you later.
So we don't encourage that. Special needs shelters. And I can tell you, when individuals go to sign up to or to register someone for special needs shelters, I think the city's Jack's Ready website is a wonderful resource for folks, and it really dictates or explains what one of the things that is mentioned there specifically are that a caregiver must accompany the individual requiring more than basic assistance. What we are there for, and our staff, we're there. We can provide that basic assistance to all of our clients within our shelters. But if it's something beyond that, we really are looking for that caregiver to maintain with that and stay with that individual, and we make provision for the caregivers to be next to the individuals as well. And things that I do like to touch on is when we talk about shelters and hurricanes. One thing that's brought up is we just hear shelters, and then we hear the term special needs shelters are thrown in, and really just want to take time to sort of just put out there, educate a little bit, the two types of shelters that are open in our community. And so we have what's called general population shelters, and then we have what's special needs shelters. So general population shelters, those shelters are staffed and manned by the American Red Cross. Special needs shelters, the Department of Health is statutorily mandated to staff and operate special needs shelters within the county. And so that sole responsibility falls on us here at the Department of Health. And really, special needs is really defined as, any individual who has a physical, mental, cognitive impairment or sensory disability. And so these are individuals who are electrically dependent or oxygen dependent. So we're taking care of some of the most vulnerable people during our most awful times here in our city. And so what we always try to stress to individuals is that, the things that are listed when you go to register a loved one within the special needs registry, those really are to ensure that we can provide the best care to that loved one when they enter our shelter. And so we really stress for individuals to adhere to those specifications and to understand what is going to be required and what is provided at the special needs shelter, so that everybody is on the same page. Because really, again, we want to be on the same page to provide the best care to the person who's coming in with that.
I need to ask this question because it's kind of I think before, so let's say our man, like many people do when they ask to evacuate, we leave, and boy, did we have one heck of a hurricane come through, and it reminds me of Homestead, Florida, when Andrew hit.
Oh yeah.
And the disaster that it left in terms of housing, and it looked like a bomb had went off. And I realized my place is totally gone. Okay. is there any preparedness for those type of circumstances? Because we have asked people to evacuate in the past. We may have just evacuated the beaches and not the whole city, but we have. But given what they're talking about, climate change and the propensity for devastating hurricanes to occur, what are the plans for that? If we,
that's a great question, because so there are a lot of great organizations post storm that will come, not just FEMA, right? There's an organization that will help those in need clean out a flooded house, because within 36 hours, it is going to start to grow. And this organization comes in and helps bring out all the water out of your house. There are organizations out there who help put on blue tarps, and post storm is when we start hearing about those types of organizations. I was deployed down to Hurricane Ian back in 2022, and there were organizations who came into Sanibel Island and fed people, right? Or some of the small fishing villages, because they had no power, no water, no food, and they would set up basically a kitchen and feed people for weeks and months at a time. There's a list that I believe FEMA also keeps a list of those. The Red Cross is a great resource as well. But there are a lot of organizations. Now, there are a lot of people out there who charge money and who are scamming people. So, that's through the state attorney's office, the attorney general's office. That's the biggest thing I worry about, are people who try to scam, especially older generation folks or people who don't have access to a lot of resources, who scam them out of money just for, purposes of taking their money. Greed.
Now, I guess one of the things I'm kind of looking at is trying to figure out, okay, the Red Cross and stuff like that. A person like myself, I don't have special needs or anything along that line. But I go out of town because I'm a runner, and I am somewhat of a special needs person. But I get back and I'm trying to figure out how to get connected back into the system to accommodate my needs. And, because this hurricane disaster questions, we may wind up calling you guys trying to figure out, okay, my house is torn to shreds. I don't know where to go.
Right.
Give me some help. What do we do along those lines?
The city of Jacksonville and Jax Ready, that is such a great resource. And most, just about every disaster that's occurred, the city, whatever city it occurs in, with us, I'm going to look at that Jax Ready. I'm going to look at the city's website, because guarantee you, FEMA comes in and they set up this one-stop shop. And that's where people go to fill out the financial aid information. That's where they go to look for housing. But that Jax Ready app is going to be a huge source of information. It's a free app for your cell phone, and or you can get it, look it up online. But that's going to be locally, the city's website and Jax Ready website. That's going to be the place I tell people to go look at.
Yeah, definitely. Jax Ready is, I was going to mention that is a prime resource for any and all information for folks to go to find out in terms of disaster planning and disaster resources. One of the other things, just to comment on what you said, Dr. Kane, for our special needs clients in particular, and I'm going to talk about them because that's the population that we care for. There's a very intricate system that is embedded in the Emergency Operations Center to ensure that once post storm and we're looking to demobilize and get those shelter occupants or individuals who have designated special needs, and we're getting service back in our city, to get them the resources that they need. If you are a shelter occupant in our special needs shelter, there's a team. So JSO goes out and JSO clears your property to ensure there isn't any down power lines. There's no trees blocking the road. There's no trees on your home. And they do that in conjunction with JEA, who's looking to make sure that the electricity is on and functioning at the home. All this is checked before the client, leaves our special needs shelter. And then once it is clear, then we work with those clients to discharge them back to their homes if their homes are safe to go to. If someone can't return home, then we work with the various organizations at the Emergency Operations Center. And really, for me, the coordination that happens at the EOC is some of the best coordinations. And I hate that common, or I would say just the residents of this city can't see what goes on up at that EOC center, because there you have all the key agencies. You have the Department of Health, you have the hospital systems, you got JTA, you got JSO, you got JFRD, you got Cities Emergency Management, you got DCPS. All of us are working in conjunction to ensure that pre-storm, we keep residents safe, and then post-storm, we're getting individuals the resources that they need. And so if there is a situation where an individual's home is uninhabitable, then those resources, those agencies are right there. We coordinate together, and then we find a location for that individual to be placed at. I can tell you that for special needs clients, when we had, I think it was Irma, we had a prolonged response here in our community. I paid for hotel rooms for some of my special needs clients because their homes were unable to, for them to go back into, and there's some work that needed to be done. And so the agencies, my point is the agencies find a way to get the folks the resources that they need. And a lot of times it is, if it's a very prolonged response or a big response, that's where we reach out to our state and federal partners to inform them these are the resources, and then those are immediately brought in for our city.
Yep.
That's the kind of story that.
I'm sorry, JT. I have to ask about provision for homeless individuals.
The unhoused.
Yes, so
there's shelters for them.
Yes, and so so if they're in a general population shelter or some that are in our special needs shelters, we work with the various homeless organizations here in town for placement for those individuals to ensure that they have some place to go. A lot of times it's working directly with Souls Walker Center, things of that nature, to ensure that we can place those individuals and that we have a place to go. And then we offer them transportation to get to those specific areas that have been designated so that they can get there and so they can receive the services that they need.
How do we spread the word to the homeless? I'm sorry. How do we spread the word to the homeless?
Well, so that there's a team, actually, the city has this great team that they're walking the roads. They know where a lot of these camps are, and they're telling them, look, hey, there's a storm coming up. We're going to help. We're going to get you into safety. Now they can't make them, right? But we can. This team, I absolutely love them because if I notice some issues or some needs, I can call them and they go right out to that area. And they'll talk to everybody and say, hey, we got to get you to safety. There's a bad storm coming.
Yeah, I just have to do a little shameless plug because, again, working at the health department for so long, Jacksonville has a ton of churches.
Yep.
And it was always my dream that churches would open their doors and at minimal let some of their members who may have lived alone, for instance, or if they didn't have special needs, but they just had maybe some mobility issues, if they would all huddle together during a storm and have the necessary supplies. I know we always say, am I my brothers and sisters keepers? And to me, during those times, that's something that a church should, if they have a stable building themselves, a dwelling, then, think about your congregation or your neighbors around in the community where your church resides. Work with the city, the health department, and the teams that have to, mobilize with these folks after the fact of where do they go afterwards? Can you house some folks if housing becomes, a need, if there becomes a need, and hotels, whatever, are filled. So I want to ask a question to both of you before we wrap up the show. Of what's a memorable occasion from a storm for you that you want to say, if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would have done it a certain way. Maybe you shouldn't answer that because you have to report to some people above you. But is there a memorable time? I'm gonna start, Antonio, because I was at the health department with you during this time. I had just come back. It was in 2018. I had just come back from having surgery, and we had a bad storm to come through, and I had to stay down at the EOC. I was down there for 3 days. And I remember after the storm, my neighbor is a police officer. He was there at the EOC with me, and he came and he was out on one of the teams assessing. Of course, came by our neighborhood, and he was like, "You can't get home." It was too, the bridge that crosses into our communities. So we really, and I wanted to mention that because neighborhoods should assess their communities now, right? Alert, tell the city, meet with other neighborhood associations nearby, and say, as a community, what can we do to help one another in preparation? In the case for us, the city realized that this was a situation that, kind of like a one way in, one way out, and people were stuck. If you didn't have big four-wheel drives, you could not get into the neighborhood. And there are many other neighborhoods probably around the town that are like that. So, Disaster Jen and Antonio, as we wrap up the show, tell me, do you have a memorable experience or story that you'd like to share regarding before the storm, during the storm, or after the storm that you really wanted to be a learning opportunity for our viewers? Jen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think every storm. I was deployed in Hugo, Katrina, Ian, Superstorm Sandy, right? To go help out. I think for me, honestly, and this is for me. I am so glad now since then that I started to get mental health first aid. I teach mental health first aid. That mental health first aid is like tools in my toolbox, because a lot of what we see is devastation. It is people. I just wanted to grab them and hold them and just not let go. And I kept all of that emotion here. The biggest one for me is mentally making sure that I have the tools to take care of myself so that I can take care of someone else. That is the biggest thing. When at Katrina, and I would walk into areas and just total devastation.
Yeah.
All I knew to do was just hold these people. And now I have better tools. I know what to say, how to say it, and then take care of myself. So mental health first aid is huge for me.
And that's so important because I think about even this past weekend, someone posted on Facebook in the Paxson area that there was some storm, or somewhere in Jacksonville, when a big storm happened, and these storms are happening and getting more violent now. And so even a big rainstorm, and Antonio, you said earlier, it's not just hurricanes that you are ready for. You're ready for other situations. So when these storms happen, and nothing against our first responders, but people forget hospitals and health department are also first responders, and you're a part of the team. We know police and firefighters, they go out as well, but there are a whole lot of people that are a part of the emergency operation system here in Jacksonville. Antonio, what about you? Do you have a memorable experience from pre, during, or after?
Probably a couple, but a couple of things that stick out in mind was one that was memorable for myself. Public Health Incident Command, and so our Public Health Incident Command is the command structure that supports all of our special needs shelters, and so the shelters communicate with them for any and all needs that are clients within the shelter have, and so that they can provide the resources, and then that is pushed up to the emergency operations center, so we can coordinate to ensure the resources are given. And so I remember one year where during the storm, where our backup generator for our incident command didn't kick in, and we were down, and so we had to put an emergency call to JEA. I remember the JEA technician, his name was Ted, and he came out to work on our building because it was critical that we got up and running so that we could service those shelters. And so the memory of that is me standing outside in the whipping rain, 35-mile-per-hour rain, holding the ladder for Ted as he worked on our generator to get the power back on in the building. Something just for my staff, I've been in extended responses, and I remember one, there was a staff member, and he and we were tasked to go and review and look at another space that we could host our public health incident command during one storm. And the staff member, we happened to drive by his street, and he saw that his house was up to halfway through his front door was completely flooded. And so, that to me triggered when we got back to talk with our current leadership to start to look at, critical incident stress management. And because the folks who are responding, we have to remember that they're there to serve our community, to help, but they're going through the same thing as well.
Yep.
And so it's important that we, train and teach folks on how to manage themselves during that critical time of crisis, and how to handle that stress, because if they break down, then that in turn breaks down the assistance that they're for the folks who are there to help. And so really being able to provide that training, that's something that we do now for all of our employees since then, is provide that training to them so they understand how to handle all the stress that are in those critical moments, so they can continue to function. But it was tough. It was tough seeing the look on his face, and it was tough, consoling him, but that just reminded me, that, our staff, we're out there and we're serving the public and we're doing our duty, but, we're residents of the community as well. And so our homes are impacted, our families are impacted as well. And all that's going through their minds as they're trying to service and do their duty. So, providing that critical incident stress management is real key.
Well, this was wonderful. You all have shared so much information. As Dr. Kane always says, an hour is never enough. but we appreciate you sharing your years of experience and really trying to make sure that people are getting ready. Some of the sites that we shared, jacksready.com, ready.gov, FEMA, you just mentioned a few. So make sure that, folks just need to go on those sites.
Yep.
Each week we like to share a History Maker Minute. You're welcome to stay on, but I'm gonna let you off the hook and say you all can go ahead and get some dinner with your families. But we want to we want to thank you first of all for being our guest, and let you know that once you're on, you're back on, because you're both our repeat guests. So we're probably going to want to have you on again. But thank you so much. But we do have a History Maker Minute.
Well, but before we get to that, I do want to make sure we get. I gotta say this because I'm not sure if they're going to come back. Which one of you guys doesn't have something?
Always going to come back.
No, I mean in terms of the next minute or so. Antonio, you and I served on a little committee in inaugurating the current city administration as to the responsibilities of the Department of Health and how you guys help coordinate the emergency preparedness center and operations, yada, yada, yada. And so I don't want to leave this podcast without at least recognizing that the city, up under our new administration, really reached out and wanted to find out how do they do it? What do they do? Yeah. And that you stepped up to the plate and educated them very well on the processes. And they were amazed because they were not familiar. It was a new administration. And so you guys quickly stepped in to educate them on what needs to be done before the next disaster strikes. So my kudos to you and your co-workers and what you guys have accomplished, as well as you, Disaster Jen, as well as you in terms of what you guys, participation in this whole process. So I just want to make sure I thank you guys before you got off the air.
I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Dr. Kane. I think it was a really important topic. I was glad to be here and share. And always happy to come back for any other topics that you guys were having.
Well, we may come back to, it depends on how bad these hurricanes start looking. We may have to come back and talk about this again. Okay.
And this podcast will be available as well on YouTube afterwards, so it can obviously stay out there in the universe. Jim, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I always end with these words: stay informed, be alert, have a plan, and Disaster Jen checking in.
So poetic. So we're going to end, and Dr. Kane and I are going to come back afterwards, but we're going to show our history maker moment. It's a little long, but it's important as it relates to tonight's topic. And if you all need to sign off, because I know we've gone a little over time, thank you again for coming on. And the wizard, Tyrone, will go ahead and cue up the history maker moment. So to our audience, don't go anywhere. Check
Welcome to Pause for the Truth, History Makers. Minute July 30th, 2024. Today we're going to deviate from a specific person to hurricanes in general in the state of Florida. Knowing what to do, how to prepare, when to evacuate, that can be the difference between weathering the storm safely or facing disaster. In this video, we'll cover 3 crucial aspects: preparedness, early detection, and evacuation. We're going to walk you through the steps to take well before a storm threatens, so you're not caught off guard. Then we'll examine how you can stay informed, track a hurricane's path, and get timely information. And if necessary, we'll talk about when and how to evacuate safely. But first, we're going to delve into the history of hurricanes in Florida, including the first recorded hurricane and the top 5 hurricanes to hit the state. Understanding the past can be crucial to preparing for the future. So, let's get started. Hurricane preparedness, your lifeline before the storm. Preparation, folks, that's key. You can't wait for a hurricane warning to start getting ready. You need to be proactive. First things first, a hurricane kit. This isn't just a good idea, it's essential. Think about what you and your family would need. If the power goes out, if you're stuck at home for days or even weeks, water, non-perishable food, flashlights, batteries, a first aid kit, medications. Next, secure your home. Trim those trees. Bring in anything that could become a projectile in high winds. Remember, a lawn chair can become a dangerous missile in a hurricane. Board up windows, or if you have hurricane shutters, make sure they're in good working order. And don't forget to create a family emergency plan. Where will you meet if you're separated? How will you communicate? Have a plan, write it down, and review it with your family. This isn't just about possessions, this is about protecting what matters most, your loved ones. And finally, know your evacuation zone. The state of Florida has resources online where you can plug in your address and see if you're in an evacuation zone. Print this information out, don't rely on your phone or computer in case of a power outage. Remember, being prepared is the best defense against the unpredictable nature of hurricanes. Early detection, staying ahead of the storm. Early detection is crucial when it comes to hurricanes. We're talking about sophisticated systems that track these storms from the moment they form as tropical depressions off the coast of Africa. Satellites, weather buoys, hurricane hunter aircraft, these are our eyes and ears out in the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico. They give us the data, the track, the intensity, and that information is relayed to you through weather reports, apps, and emergency alerts. Remember the days when we relied on weather radios and the nightly news for hurricane updates? Technology has come a long way. Now, you can get real-time information on your smartphone with a push of a button. But it's not just about having the technology, it's about knowing how to use it. Familiarize yourself with reliable weather apps and websites. Sign up for emergency alerts from your local authorities. The National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service, these are your go-to sources for accurate and timely information. They will tell you when to expect tropical storm or hurricane force winds, when to anticipate heavy rainfall and flooding, and most importantly, whether or not you need to evacuate. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to hurricanes. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions for yourself and your family. Chapter 3. Evacuation, knowing when and how to leave. This is critical. Evacuation. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's a decision based on the best available information from experts, from those who understand the science, the projections, the potential impact of a hurricane. When your local authorities issue an evacuation order, it's time to go. Don't try to ride it out. Don't think you can tough it out. This isn't about bravery, it's about common sense. Hurricanes are unpredictable. They can change course, intensify rapidly. What might seem like a manageable situation can turn dangerous very quickly. If you're ordered to evacuate, have a plan. Know where you're going, whether it's a friend or relative's home outside the evacuation zone, a hotel, or a designated shelter. Pack your essential documents, medications, a change of clothes. And remember, roads will be congested. Leave early. Don't wait until the last minute. And if you have pets, make sure you have a plan for them as well. Many shelters don't accept animals, so have a designated place for them to go. Your safety, your family's safety, that's the priority. Chapter 4. A legacy of storms, hurricanes in Florida's history. Florida has a long and storied history with hurricanes. They've been shaping our coastline, testing our resilience for centuries. The first recorded hurricane to hit Florida struck near Miami in 1565, a Category 3 storm that decimated the Spanish fleet anchored there. Since then, we've seen countless hurricanes, each leaving its own mark on our state. The great Miami hurricane of 1926, a Category 4 monster, forever changed the landscape of South Florida. Hurricane Andrew in 1992, a Category 5 storm, unleashed its fury on Dade County, highlighting the importance of building codes and disaster preparedness. Then there was Hurricane Irma in 2017, a sprawling storm that stretched the entire length of the Florida peninsula, causing widespread damage and testing our infrastructure like never before. And who can forget Hurricane Michael in 2018, a Category 5 behemoth that devastated the Florida Panhandle, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. These storms, as destructive as they are, serve as stark reminders of the power of nature and the importance of respecting its fury. They are etched in our collective memory, shaping our policies, our infrastructure, our very way of life here in Florida. Chapter 5, Top 5, Florida's most impactful hurricanes. Now let's take a look at